Hi there, Isha here, and welcome to this episode of The Higher Life, where I take concepts that are considered spiritual, new agey, psychological, or esoteric, and show you how you can apply these as practical tools to greatly empower your life. And today's episode is such a key theme in this work of personal transformation, and that is, what is happiness? Because happiness really, or the seeking of happiness, is the key driver of the human experience. And I think that we're all very aware of how much this preoccupies us in our lives, whether we're happy, not happy as other people, less happy than other people. We really are seeking some kind of outcome in our lives that we do term happiness. So it is something that I think is really important to unpack, and it's important to unpack it because it is in fact a inner resourcefulness that we can connect to happiness, something that is available to us at all times, even though we are conditioned to believe that happiness is sourced from our external world. And anyone who's been in this field of personal empowerment for a while will have heard the common saying within spiritual ideologies and models that everything we need is within us, and that happiness is something that we can only really generate from within, even though we spend a lot of our lives chasing it outside ourselves. And I really wanted to unpack this because there is a lot of confusion around this relationship that we have to happiness and this relationship we have to the outside world, especially in our relationships. That is, our intimate relationships, our family dynamics, this way that we relate to other people, in a way from this seeking perspective, seeking to be happier than we were without them, is a fundamental flaw in our relating styles. So first of all, what is happiness in the context of personal empowerment? Happiness is really this sense of being very at ease in yourself and almost disconnected from any kind of drama in life. It's a kind of contentment. It's almost subtle that you feel when you're just completely at ease with yourself and at ease with life. We often think of happiness as something more jubilant, I believe, sort of laughter and a higher experience, a kind of peak experience where we just feel so alive. And this can be a form of happiness, but in a way it's a flavor of or expression of something else, a more subtle experience that happiness really is. It's kind of the baseline energy where you're very much in alignment with your true self. So you're feeling this real natural equilibrium, being alive. And it can fluctuate high and low, but it doesn't take you off path. You still feel this sense of ease, this natural sense of wonder of being alive. And it's very peaceful. It's very mature, and it's quite subtle. And that is why I think it's hard for us to really understand that it's something that we are made of and something that we can generate within ourselves. We do have an over-attachment to happiness being a peak experience. It is a flavor of happiness where we are very exuberant or joyful or feeling really high in our lives. And the problem with attaching to this version of happiness as the only happiness means that when you're not feeling that high, that exuberance, that sense of just absolute joy of being here, you tend to believe that you are therefore unhappy, and you go out and you try to seek this peak experience or this flavor of happiness again, and we have then what is known as the seeker. But what you're actually seeking is a very limited version of happiness, a peak experience happiness that is a high. So you're seeking actually peak experiences which can keep you on a high version of happiness. Now, if I was to translate this seeking of happiness or peak experience happiness to drug addiction, there wouldn't be much difference. People who are addicted to substances of any kind, and I have been there myself, are seeking actually this high that comes from taking that particular drug. I mean, at the moment, my drug of choice is caffeine, and honestly, it just completely fundamentally changes my day after having a coffee. I just feel like I can take on the world. And I have an addiction to this feeling state of wanting to take on the world and have energy for everything. And I have spoken to that in past episodes about having limited energy, and when I drink coffee or take substances, I can kind of override that reality that I have limited energy, and I can feel happier, that's what I believe, because I'm able to achieve and to get things done and to cope with my life. I feel like a happier person until I burn out, and then I feel very unhappy. So you can see how particular seekings of happiness and happiness as a peak experience can be very, very dangerous. And as a society, we are very enmeshed with this particular version of happiness. We definitely are at a time in our lives with all of this material affluence available to us where we just simply go out and seek happiness through peak experiences or through relationships or through things outside ourselves. So here is a interesting, I guess, angle to take on this pursuit for happiness, and one that I have heard come up a lot when I've been watching spiritual teachers answer questions from audiences. There's always this fundamental confusion around relationships, especially intimate partnerships or marriages. You know, this idea that relationship essentially should be making you happy, and when you are no longer happy in that relationship, there is something fundamentally wrong with the relationship and you need to leave it or change it or fix it. And it's interesting because it feels so real. I mean, we all know that when we're around particular people and in relationship with particular people or doing particular activities, feeling happy seems a lot easier. And then sometimes we're in relationships, particularly with family of origin, or when our own intimate relationships aren't going well, or we're struggling with our kids or at work with our boss, where we don't feel happy easily in the relationship. Or there's particular tasks, like for myself, cleaning the house, where being happy while I'm cleaning the house feels more difficult than it does than when I'm making a video lesson like this, where I just feel so close to my own happiness. Everything just feels easy and effortless, and I feel really at one with myself. So I know that I'm having this variance depending on who I'm with and what I'm doing. So it makes sense to me that people equate the relationship that they're having as the source of the happiness. That is where the happiness is coming from, or the activity they're doing as the source of their happiness. But I'd like to reframe it in this teaching and say what is actually going on is when you are with a particular person or in a particular relationship, it can be either easier or more challenging for you to stay connected to your own innate happiness. So a relationship, particularly with a negative-minded person, can throw you off balance and have you disconnect with the source of happiness, that is your own capacity for happiness, this own ease that you're experiencing that is very energetic. So we all know that you can be cruising along in your day, feeling quite good, have a conversation with your partner or your boss, and they may be in a really negative space, and you just suddenly get thrown out of that energy pattern of joy or ease or calm or inspired, and suddenly feel very dark. And you will go, right, that person is to blame. That is the source of my unhappiness. But all that's actually happened is you've been thrown off course. You were traveling along very deeply connected to your own true self, the source of your well-being. You're feeling well, and then this negative energy pattern has kind of interrupted that. And this is exactly the moment where we do the inner work and we come back into that connection with ourselves and remind ourselves, wait, hold on, that's just something that's come into my space. It's thrown me a little bit, but now I recognize that I can come back into myself. And there is a whole lot of tools and strategies that I've been teaching here at The Higher Life, but are being taught out there in the world that can really help you do that. Things like meditation or contemplation, pausing and pivoting. Some like Abraham Hicks talk about distraction, so choosing higher vibration thoughts, which can be effective in the moment, and I think is a great tool when you're triggered. That is, you really need to just bring yourself back into balance, but perhaps not the best tool for a long-term, more sustainable sense of being really connected to your happiness, only that it can be used to distract you from actually feeling your feelings, and you don't want it to become something that helps you avoid a feeling that you may need to just process in the moment. So I may be triggered and anger shows up, and it's okay to feel that. It's really okay to feel the anger and to let it process, but to let it take hold and become a story about how somebody else has made you angry and you no longer can be happy is where the dark stuff starts unfolding, and we get locked into conflicts and into beliefs that our relationships are not working, or we need to leave them, or we need to defend or protect. So this seeking of happiness, it's primal, and it will have us behave in really primal ways. If we believe our happiness, our capacity to be happy in the world is being threatened, diminished by other people or by certain activities, we will have a very negative relationship to that source of our discontent. And that is why we see so much breakdown and so many people not really living the life that they want to be living, because every time they hit a snag with a person or through an activity that they're not enjoying, they become fixated on fixing that or changing that or escaping from that, and it takes precious time and energy, where in fact you can simply transcend it and keep following the path that you are on. And this is such a powerful way to live your life. Now, I'm going to put a little caveat here. This teaching is not for people who are in situations or relationships or involved in activities that are harmful. That is a different set of skills that you need to be applying in your situation. The teaching here is very much about understanding that happiness is ease. It's feeling at ease with yourself and feeling very open and alive. It's a subtle energy. Happiness manifests in different flavors. So we can experience different flavors of happiness. It can be joy, it can be exuberance, it can be excitement, it can be tenderness. There's lots of different bliss. There's lots of different ways that happiness can manifest. And I believe that we have our own unique flavor of happiness. For me, it's this just this real easiness and pleasure that I feel, especially when I'm doing videos or coming to a clarity. It just feels so subtly wonderful to be alive and having that experience. So that is the flavor of my happiness. I don't tend to do the super excited happiness. It happens occasionally, but it's not sort of where my go-to place is when I'm feeling really at ease and really happy with myself. And I've worked with lots of clients over the years where happiness shows up differently for them. They have their own unique flavor of happiness, and that's really part of the self-exploration that you go through when you're walking the path of personal transformation, because what you really want is to be able to generate more happiness when you're feeling the absence of it, and to be able to share more of the happiness when it's really alive in you. So it's very much a relationship that you're having with your own self, the source of happiness. However, we do have a saboteur, a self that doesn't believe that happiness is your natural birthright, your natural state, and very much believes that happiness is out there in the world and it's something that you need to seek. And I would propose that all seeking, especially seeking that takes you into spiritual circles or seeking a spiritual path, begins with seeking happiness. You are seeking a happier way to live your life, and you think you can find it somewhere. And once you've been along the spiritual path for some time, what you realize is what you've really been seeking is the right tools and the right education to actually cultivate your inner capacity to generate happiness. So you kind of have an about face where you go, oh, it's actually not out there. That's what I was doing before, seeking it out there, and it was creating suffering. And the suffering that it created triggered this desire to go out and seek a better way, a better life, which is exactly how my spiritual path took off. You know, this idea that there's got to be a better way to live, because the way I was experiencing life as a child, as a teenager, watching my family system suffer so much and suffering as a consequence of it, you know, I was very aware that however we were living our lives and what we were being taught was important really wasn't working. Just pragmatically, all I could see was people suffering or pretending not to suffer and selling stories, especially celebrity stories of perfection that, you know, any person with half a brain can realize that is just not achievable. When we are in relationships with other human beings, there is always this seeking of happiness in the relationship, and a natural crisis relationships go through because they do not want to be the source of another happiness, so they will resist it. And we can't have that need met in a relationship, and it will create a chaos which will either break up the relationship or help the people in that relationship understand that the relationship was never the source of the happiness, and we have to actually do that for ourselves, and then that actually transforms our relationships. So we can have really dynamic marriages and family of origin relationships and relationships with our children and our bosses and our friends, when we really get clear that happiness is self-generated, that when you are in situations where it's very unavailable, it's because the pattern that you have come across or that has come into your space has unnerved you, has set you off on the wrong track, and it's up to you to come back on track. So it's a really powerful teaching, this one, because what I'm saying to you is the only seeking that really has any value is the one where you are actually seeking out tools and education and a process that can empower this natural capacity that you have to generate happiness within yourself. And that leads me to the second part of most spiritual teachings, which is, what is the purpose of your life? Well, it really is to express that happiness in all that you do and every relationship that you have. Now, that is not to be a positive person. We're not asking you to act positive and view everything in your relationship and the activities that you're doing from a positive mindset. Not at all. It's simply about being able to bring a certain ease into all that you do, and understand that even when you're going through a difficult time or doing a task that you find challenges your capacity to feel happy, that it is available to you, but it might take a little bit more work. So those tools that you've been learning can play out and be very powerful in these moments where the absence of happiness is what you're facing. So it really is like going to, I guess, happiness boot camp, where you've been given the skills and now you need to actually apply them and generate that happiness. And oh my God, when you're able to do that, you become so confident, so joyful, and so your life is just effortless, because you no longer need to seek. You no longer need to rely on your relationships for happiness. You no longer need to feel extremely fearful, which is what that saboteur does, that when things are going wrong or seemingly wrong in your relationships or your jobs or your life in general, that you will never be happy, because you can be happy actually in that experience. You don't need the experience to change in order to be happy. You don't need to be excited or overjoyed or thrilled, but you can access that peaceful, calm ease that is available in any situation. And I have to say that this really landed for me in early parenthood with children, you know, looking after children day in and day out, sometimes weeks on end without a break, and they tantrum and they go through mood swings, and the capacity to find neutral ground and to be at ease when my child is having a tantrum just fundamentally transformed our relationship in that moment. Because if I had wanted them to be okay so that I could be okay, I would be desperately trying to get them out of that state, when it just isn't possible, because when someone's in a tantrum or a triggered state, they need time to calm down. So the added pressure of me needing them to be okay so I could be okay would just turn that already stressful moment into a crisis moment. And I think that we all have been through that process and regretted it later, or at least gone, what happened there? So it's such a powerful pathway, this journey of personal transformation, that leaves you fully empowered, because what you're really doing is developing the right mindset through a new education and cultivating an inner capacity to generate happiness within yourself, for yourself first, always for yourself first, and to detangle yourself from the messy codependency and enmeshment that occurs when you are seeking happiness through another person, through your relationship, through your job, through anything external, because that is a recipe for disaster every time, and it will have you leaving situations that were okay, were perfectly fine, that could support you, even though that saboteur who believes that happiness is somewhere else had a really strong and convincing argument about how you were being neglected or wounded or unmet. Now, sometimes a relationship really does need to end because you simply have reached a capacity in that relationship for how far it can go. It doesn't want to grow the relationship, it wants to end. Or you're maturing and growing and your partner is not. And that's a difficult space to find yourself in, but absolutely one worth contemplating. I follow the wise advice of Richard Rudd, who says, choose to stay for as long as you can and work through it as long as you can, because you'll be saving yourself a lot of heartbreak later. If you don't do the work in this relationship, believing you can be happier in the next one, it will show up in the next relationship and you'll have to do the work there. So better to face the tough stuff now, develop the skill set to generate your own happiness, and imagine your future with that kind of mastery. So if this is something you find exciting, absolutely check out the Path of Personal Transformation, which I guide you through, that will have you leaving this work, leading an empowered life, at the Higher Life Academy, or stay tuned for more episodes at the Higher Life, where I continue to offer this free teaching so that you can actually upskill without ever passing through any other work with me. I do think that the Path of Personal Transformation is a key part of being able to live in an empowered way. It certainly has been the path that has catapulted my life from being one of enmeshment and codependency to one that is much closer to being the empowered person that I want to become. So until next time, take care and love life.